Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Politics and Prose. I'm Brad Graham. I'm the co-owner of the store, along with my wife, Alyssa Muscatine, and we are very, very pleased yet again to be hosting James Grady, this time for his new novel, American Sky. Now, I had this very elaborate, really brilliant introduction written. However, we're also very fortunate to have with us this evening George Pelecanos. And George was going to be in conversation with Jim, but he would prefer just to introduce Jim and then sit here with his wife and enjoy the show. And I don't blame him. So I'll just say a couple words about George, who's DC's, of course, master of crime fiction. And he's spoken here, I don't know how many times, I think we've lost count. Not for all his 20-some novels and short story collections, but for quite a few. In addition to being a novelist, George, like James, has written for film and television and was a producer and writer on the HBO series The Wire, Treme, and The Pacific, and co-creator and showrunner of HBO's The Deuce and We Own the City. So please join me in welcoming George Pelecanos.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you all again. And I need to read this, if you don't mind. We're here this evening to celebrate the publication of James Grady's new novel, American Sky. American Sky is actually two novels published in one volume, the conclusion of a trilogy that began with The Smoke in Our Eyes. The Smoke in Our Eyes detailed the life of young Luke Ross's childhood in the late 1950s to the early 60s. American Sky follows Luke in his teen years through senior high and then in his 20s as he's launched into the world. It's set in a fictional small town in Montana, which Luke describes as 60 miles west of the Rocky Mountains, 30 miles south of the Canadian border, and a million miles from everywhere else. I say fictional, but the environs and its characters are clearly based on Shelby, the town where Jim Grady grew up. This is autobiographical fiction, and to understand it, I need to give you a little bit of the author's history. Jim is the grandson of a cowboy and a homesteader. His family roots are in Ireland. Jim's father managed a movie theater and a drive-in, where Jim watched, by his count, thousands of movies in his youth. His mother was a public librarian. Many writers don't want to admit it, maybe because they think it makes them seem less literary. But for some of us, movies were just as important as books in fueling our writing ambitions. The influence of both was strong in Jim's young life, and the result was artistically combustible. In his younger years, Jim worked as a gravedigger, janitor, tractor driver, and movie projectionist. College summers, he worked on a municipal road crew, all formative experiences for a writer. He went to college at the University of Montana, where he studied under the poet Richard Hugo. As a college student, he was a research analyst for Montana's Constitutional Convention and then garnered a fellowship as an intern aide to Montana State Senator Lee Metcalf during the Watergate scandals. This brought him to Washington, D.C. Jim was a journalism major, and now he had dipped his feet into politics, so you'd think that this career path would have been preordained, you'd think. During that internship, Jim lived at 6th and A Southeast, and on his everyday walk to work, he'd pass a townhouse at the corner of 4th and A with a plaque on its front door, American Historical Association. He never saw anyone come in and out of that townhouse, and Jim thought, what if that place is a CIA front? And then his imagination kicked into high gear, and he thought, what if I worked there as a staffer and I got sent out to get lunch, and when I returned, everyone had been murdered? Novels just don't happen. They have to get written and they have to get sold. But in the interest of time, let me take a shortcut here to say that Jim's first novel, 6 Days of the Condor, was born out of that light bulb day fueled by his fertile imagination. And then shortly thereafter came the film adaptation, 3 Days of the Condor, with Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway, that was not just a smash, but to this day is considered to be one of the most enduring movies to come out of the golden age of cinema decade of the 1970s. Jim was 25 years old. In that decade, he worked as an investigative reporter for Jack Anderson. His experience there, his acquired knowledge, and his inquisitive nature made his way into his subsequent novels, which number over a dozen. He's a film screenwriter and essayist who often celebrates in print his art obsessions: singer-songwriter, rock and roll, film, and literature. Jim met his wife, Bonnie Goldstein, while he was interviewing her for a writing project. Bonnie was a private eye at the time and has also been a TV network news producer and Senate aide. Their daughter, Rachel Grady, is an Academy Award-nominated documentary filmmaker. Their son, Nathan, is a short fiction writer and entrepreneur. So back to American Sky. It is a portrait of a young man as an artist and a panoramic novel set against the background of the turbulent 60s in a unique setting that is underserved in literature, small-town America. What it's not is empty nostalgia. It's clear-eyed, moving, and honest. I've read all of Jim's novels. This one represents a high point in his career. And what a remarkable life. We're fortunate to have him here tonight to tell us more about it. Please welcome local legend, James Grady.
Wow. Thank you all for being here tonight. This means a great deal to me to look out and see all these familiar faces that have been supporting me in my fiction decades. And I also want to give a thank you to George Pelicanos, the local legend the national legend who just made me seem much more exciting than I really am. One of the things that triggered me to write about this time and this book, and in fact, the entire trilogy that American Sky is part of, is a very simple fact. We all grow up. And that period of growing up, that period of us uncovering the world, seeing the world, learning about the world, and what it was like to be in that world, stay with us all the rest of our lives. There was a moment where I was back in my old hometown of Shelby, Montana, pre-COVID, about 2018. And in July, it was pretty much like this, only there on the Montana prairie. It was dry heat. And I go up to the graveyard, as we all do, to pay my respects to those who came before. I got out of the car, and this has never happened to me before or since. Out of nowhere, I swear I heard a voice say, "All the old ghosts are leaving town." I don't know how I got from the cemetery back down to the main street, where my thoughts coalesced enough for me to realize that I owed all those old ghosts, and I owed all of us here tonight to talk about where we came from, what it was really like, and who we were. This became especially more important for me when in the last 12 years, I've heard our histories. I've heard our American history. I've heard our personal histories mangled, glossed over, and propagandized with phrases like, "Make America great again." I will say yes. I grew up when the country was really great. I mean, we were out of World War II. We had mutual assured destruction, so we were all going to die in 15 minutes. But especially growing up in the missile fields, that was a endearing quality. But yeah, I had a lucky, great childhood. But the times, do we want to go back to an era where racist homicide wasn't a rare occurrence? It happened all the time. I don't want to go back to that. Do we want to go back to an era where women, if they were lucky, were only second-class citizens? If they weren't lucky, they were often subjected to levels of abuse, discrimination, and criminal activity that make us shudder today. We don't want to go back to a time where one of my characters in this book lived in Libby, Montana, where the asbestos company announced publicly and with pride that strange feeling, that strange scent, that strange odor in the air was nuisance dust. Yeah, it was vermiculite and asbestos, and it caused massive amounts of lung cancer, not only in Libby, Montana, but when the World Trade Towers crashed down, all the vermiculite and asbestos from Libby, Montana blew out over hundreds of thousands of rescue workers and ordinary citizens and created health problems that we're battling right now. I don't want to go back to that period of America when that wasn't particularly great. And I feel like I owe it not just to all those old ghosts, but to all of you to do my best to tell the truth about what it was like growing up then. Now, there's a difference as I look out through and I see a half dozen of my fictional colleagues sitting amongst us. There's a difference between truth and facts sometimes. And by fictionalizing the facts, by creating a totally fictional small town with fictional characters, I am able to give you a sense of the truths I saw and I learned. For example, I can talk about illegal abortions and a clinic on Main Street that provided them, a clinic I knew well. I can talk about the badge-protected, I'm going to use the colloquial term, whorehouse on the north side of my hometown because, Uncle Johnny ran it. And in the novel before this one, The Smoke in Our Eyes, I got to tell the story that I'm sure almost 50% of you also had happen to them, about being a clueless 10-year-old boy who was a pawn in a foiled attempt to help a prostitute escape from that whorehouse run by his Uncle Johnny. That was the kind of America I grew up in. And one of the things that I discovered as a journalist and traveling around this country, I was not alone in those scenarios. I would bet many of you lived in towns where everybody knew that doctor provided illegal abortions. Everybody knew that there was prostitution and essentially what we didn't have a term for then, human trafficking. I bet most of you knew stories about friends of yours, like mine, who suffered often bizarre racism. And I wanted to be able to present that to all of you in what I hope is a fast-paced, entertaining fashion. And I want to thank all of you for supporting that and supporting this trilogy and supporting me, because I think today, more than 10 years ago, this is a very important function about remembering our yesterdays, even as political figures and media figures want to gloss over them and say, oh no, we can go back to when, labor unions were busted by private investigative firms. And we can go back to the days when my friends who were Gros Ventre, Blackfeet, Muscle Show, and Cheyenne were slaughtered as second-class citizens in my high school. In my high school. Let's not go back to that America. Let's not make America that great again. And I hope through my fiction that you will be able to understand that better and to counter all the arguments to the contrary that you're going to get hit with every day. Now, the program tonight is a little different than most of, as Brad has pointed out here. What I'd like to do is I want to, let me grab the book. Remember when you were youthful and you didn't do things like that? What I'd like to do is I want to read you two sections from this two-novel volume. And I'm going to, right now, apologize to you. I hope that I can get through the second brief section without getting too emotional. No promises. After that, I want to take questions from you, and then I'll be sitting here to sign your books and thank you when you come up to say hello. So as you know, American Sky is 2 novels in 1 volume. And each of the novel has its own special title. First novel is called Something's Happening Here. And chapter 1 is titled Run. Luke fought to calm his hammering heart as he faced the walls of windows to the world outside the Thriftway grocery store that early September Saturday afternoon. His white shirt and clipped-on black tie held no incriminating stains as he scanned the blue sky horizon of his Montana Prairie Valley hometown. The treacherous 13-year-old gray Dodge smirked in the parking lot. He stood near the checkout counters of 2 chatting cashiers who he'd worked with those months of 1967 that the news was calling the summer of love. Dennis, the other box boy, snuck onto the empty elevated office platform where local AM radio station KRIP filled the store with nightclub crooners and country and western wailers. Not the rock and roll music sought by teenagers like just graduated from high school Luke. 2 years younger Dennis spun the radio dial to 100 miles away Big City, Montana station. Landed on them playing an oldie goldie song that was still the #1 hit song for American troops in Vietnam. That song title rocked Luke to his bones. We gotta get out of this place. Hell yes. Especially after what happened last night with Sherry. And what he'd done about that today that nearly got him crucified. Now all I've got to do is make it to tomorrow's road out of here. Then, right now's wall of windows showed him white uniform Sherry getting out of a car in the parking lot and heading into the grocery store. Luke flashed on how maybe it all went back to the murders. That's the start of the first novel, a calm, quiet, serene, ordinary story of America. The second novel, and bear with me for this one, is called a phrase some of you may be familiar from the great American author of my generation. The title of the second novel is called Tramps Like Us. Chapter 1 in that volume, A Bug in Your Ear. Let me put a bug in your ear, the boss told Luke. They stood in the oiled earth yard for Vernon's city crew. Monday morning, June 1, 1970. 7 minutes after the job's shape-up started work at 8 o'clock. Spring blue, big sky that Montana was famous for back then. At 7:03 that morning, Luke had sat at the breakfast table with his mom and dad. His parents' cigarettes smoldered. The kitchen countertop AM radio reported that the Vietnam War, being fought by guys Luke's generation, now claimed 43,784 KIAs, killed in action American troops. At 26 minutes to 8, Luke couldn't contain his excitement. Nearly danced the few blocks from his home to his beloved summer job on the city road crew. He wore a red hooded sweatshirt, brown leather-laced work boots, carried new buckskin gloves. His white T-shirt and blue jeans had wrapped him during his just past junior year at the State University. They'd be rags by September. And for the first time after 2 summers on the city crew, Luke wore contact lenses. I can see better, and I'm a better see for girls now than in my yesterdays of dorky black rim Coke bottle, thick-lensed glasses. Luke's terrible nearsightedness had made him certified by the draft board as 4F, unfit for military service, no matter what draft lottery number nailed him. The cool city crew air carried Boss Dave's bug-in-your-ear words to Luke, smelled of exhaust from vehicles, from burning dead dinosaurs. God, I'm glad to be here, thought Luke moments before Boss Dave sidled up to him after passing out the day's assignments to the crew. The 11 men and Luke's 2 years younger buddy Dennis moved away from Dave and Luke. Maybe some of them knew what was going on. Maybe none of them did. They were men. They had a job to do. They knew who they were in the eyes of this small town and the world. Most had loyal marriages, kids. Some had aging parents. All had beating hearts. The city crew walked across the packed earth of civilization to their machines and trucks, and most of them walked proud. Luke had gotten home for the summer on Friday. What happened Saturday, no one in town but him knew. Then came what happened Sunday. Now Luke blinked back to that June Monday morning. The boss angled his head. Luke followed him into the concrete box-like office. Wooden shelves and salvaged metal file cabinets. Empty folding chairs in front of a paper-strewn desk backed by a boss's chair. Dave jerked his head for Lou to take a seat across from the desk. Lloyd Mueller, said Dave from the boss's chair, correctly pronouncing that man's last name like a castrated donkey. Owns the smaller of our town's 2 weekly newspapers, said Luke. Nah, corrected Dave. Think of him as City Councilman Mueller. The city council ruled their city crew paychecks. He hit me up and told me to fire you from the crew, said Dave. Was on account of that letter everybody knows you wrote and got others to sign. But Mueller's Vernon Times didn't print it. Don't matter. Don't matter that the promoter printed it. You wrote it. Hell, you thought it, and that's enough for Mueller. He wants you gone, canceled. Luke's life blasted apart. Whew. Then that city supervisor, the boss of that city crew, the city employee whose job was under the thumbs of the city council, the man who'd laughed a story to Luke about chasing Japanese civilians up the stairs of a Buddhist temple with a jeep when he was part of America's World War II occupying force. The father of 3 kids he fed with a wife who could only work part-time. The father of the first local citizen to embrace the National Rifle Association's shift from gun safety issues to gun political eroticism via millions of gun manufacturers' dollars. The high school dropout who used the U.S. mail to letter back and forth moves in chess game with strangers who always lost to this phantom David Rudd in a nowhere called Vernon, Montana. Dave, who both outdoors and indoors wore a jaunty faded baseball cap. That guy, Dave, leaned across his boss' desk. And I told that son of a bitch Mueller that this is goddamn America. It doesn't matter that I don't agree with you. Doesn't matter that he don't like it. This is a free country. Our fucking flag. Said Luke can damn well believe any damn thing he wants and say any damn thing he wants and write any damn letter he gets any newspaper or wherever to publish. I told him Luke does his job, and that's all that matters to me, to the law, to our town, to some fucking God up there if there is one, and I wasn't about to fire you, no how, no way. A soft breeze rattled the office window. Luke wanted to cry with joy, pride, gratitude. But the only words he found for his now lifelong hero were, "Thank you." The chess master's smile knew what Luke meant. "Now you know what's what," said Dave as he leaned back in his chair. "So get out there and get going. You got a lot of gravel to move and miles to truck." Okay, now we're going to open up for questions, but we have a microphone there that we'd like you to use rather than to just wave your hands and hope everyone can hear you. So please, if you want to ask me some questions or, chastise me for what I've done, please come up, take the microphone, and tell us all. Mike's right here. Just so you know, this gentleman is a Washington, D.C. author.
Well, seeing you two, I don't ever have had a chance to see two heroes before. Just want you guys to know that from the bottom of my heart, really, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Now I'm going to get really kind of deep and strange. Do you think of this novel as kind of almost a you're talking about truth, but kind of a truth, but with a kind of noir tinge, kind of counterpoint to like Norman MacLean's view of Montana, or is it something that's common? I mean, you said they're both about. You talk about growing up. Is that the common thread, or is this kind of a counterpoint to, like a river runs through it, that view of growing up in Montana?
Well, Norman MacLean wrote a brilliant novel called A River Runs Through It. It may even be in the store somewhere for one of you to pick up. In that book, there's a murder. His brother's killed. And Norman also hints at many of the same things I did. You know, noir, I think, is a term that I embrace. The French dropped it on me years ago, and I figure it works because for me, noir is not all blackness. Any true noir has to have some light in there. Otherwise, it's just bleakness, and that's not what life is about. So, yeah, I think this trilogy and indeed American Sky are noir testaments, and about the kind of the shades of life that we try to deal with in throughout our lives. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Definitely, 100%, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yet another author step into the microphone.
Hi, Jim. I love what you said in the beginning. We became friends, I think, 4 years after your second novel was set, 74, 75.
Something like that, yeah.
Here's what puzzles me. Back then when we met, how did you think America would turn out now?
I think if any of us could go back 15 years and be presented with what we saw just today, we would have felt that the person who was telling this was insane. There was no way I could have predicted this, and yet we have It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. Yet we have George Orwell's 1984. Yet we have Brave New World. Yet we have a large number of poets who also talk about this. For example, William Butler Yeats. And I am blown away, Joel, by where we are now. And I don't know where we're going. I know that authors have to play an important role in it as we try to find truth to help the rest of the world move forward.
Didn't we believe that America had flaws, but we could correct the flaws?
Oh, absolutely. We all thought America had flaws, and we saw many of them being connected. We saw the rise of the women's movement, changing laws. We saw we saw the civil rights. You know, it was just John Lewis's birthday, I think, yesterday. And talk about an American hero. We got to watch, this man who said, good trouble, inspire us to move forward. I wish I had the single optimistic phrase to give you all about tomorrow, other than many of the other authors in the room are going to have new books to come out for you to read. So that's all.
Thanks.
Here comes another great author. Hi, Katie.
Hi. You spoke earlier about the power of fiction to educate us, illuminate issues today. What is your opinion? And you started out as a journalist, you're an author, your daughter is a documentarian filmmaker. What are your thoughts on college students today who have never read a complete book? These are Ivy League college students. There was a recent article about it. What are your thoughts? Is it as earth-shatteringly terrifying as I think it is, or is it just they're finding other mediums to tell their stories?
I think it is terrifying.
I do too. I was hoping you would reassure me.
How would I ever disagree with you in the first place? But no, I mean, it's absurd. People forgot that we go to the universities and we go to the high schools not to prepare ourselves for slots increasingly created by artificial intelligence. We don't go to be universities to learn to be cogs in the machine. We go to the universities to learn about humanity and our lives and the great thoughts that got us to where we are now today. And if students at universities have stopped reading books, why are they there? I mean, the guys on the road crew with me read books, you know? And the idea that especially the elite colleges, which, you know, I lectured at Harvard once, but that was it. It just, we have to keep our minds, our hearts, and our souls open and learning every day, or we're starting our own decline and death, and they're just shaping the coffins to put us in while we still breathe. Thank you.
Hello, Jim.
Oh,
I'm not an author, but I went to school with Jim at the University of Montana.
right. Could you speak a little closer?
I went to school with Jim at the University of Montana, and I came to work at the State Department, and I'm feeling very bad about what's happening there. But my question is actually, what made you choke up when you read the second part?
Okay, that was all true. That was entirely true. And I watched a man who, you know, he thought Nixon was a little too soft, and he was he disagreed with me on almost everything about politics that came up, but he believed in the what I would call real American dream, in our rights as individuals to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And he put his job on the line for this college kid's summer job, because in part he knew that was how I was going to pay for my next year of college. But more importantly, he didn't like the son of a bitch who was coming after the American dream, and he was going to stand up for it. And his real name was Dick Voorhees. I call him David Rudd after a brilliant friend of mine. And I still get choked up. You know, what is this? I don't even know. 60-some years since I had that moment. He was and he is a hero of mine. And to be able to share his heroics with you and with other readers of this book, I don't want to go on or I'll get choked up all over again.
He had your back.
He had my back in a way that you can't ask for in any better way. I think we got time for like a couple more questions. Oh, here comes. Hey.
Hi. Could you tell us a little bit about how you have sustained such a high level of curiosity throughout the many, many years you've been writing and working?
I don't really know. I think it's because I have spent all my life listening to the what ifs. and I think most of the authors who are with us here tonight and the journalists who are with us here tonight would also say that the what ifs are things that prompt them. And once you do that, I go, oh, what if that person was really in trouble and that's why their jaw is clenched so tight? Why would they be in trouble? Oh, wait a minute. Could they be at all related to what I read in the news 3 weeks? Oh, I mean, for fiction authors, it just comes. It just bubbles within me. I once ended a discussion like this when someone asked me, where does your writing come from? And I off the top of my head said, well, writing fiction for me is like a cross between a heroin addiction and sex. And I think that's probably the best answer I could give your question. Oh. Yep. And now we have one of those. Yeah.
I wonder if we could hear a little more about how you made this turn in the focus of your fiction, because for decades you were writing these wonderful political and spy thrillers, or writing about power and ambition and deception in Washington. And these last two books, you've gone back.
Yeah.
And mind your own life. I mean, was it simply that you went to a cemetery and you heard voices? I mean, there must have been more to it.
Well, that was the trigger. That was the trigger. But actually, my fourth novel was about Colstrip, Montana, and the fight over strip mining there. And now the area I wrote about is one of the largest toxic dumps in the United States. Being at Jack Anderson's column, I got to. I was in worlds that I had read about in all the thrillers and crime novels that I grew up in, and stories were all around, and I loved them. I wanted to tell them. I often found that the thriller, every author is hoping that his book is thrilling, and those kinds of stories really propelled me. And I'd written short fiction about I've written science fiction too. To me, the book determines what it's going to be. And I actually sometimes in my earlier novels wasn't sure what it was going to be until I was like, 2 chapters in, and then the character Peter stands up and says, "I'm not going to do that, you fool." So I understand this is a shift for me, but I'm a river with a lot of currents. And I've got a thriller coming out next year. So, I just keep going. Wherever the river takes me, I try to swim.
Hi. Yeah, I really appreciated your comments about not wanting to go back, at least to a number of aspects of life in the 60s and 70s and so forth, to America in the 60s and 70s. And I'm trying to put the story of Dave and Luke that you read about into context with that. So Dave's decision was principled and heroic. And I guess my question is, did you present this or think of this as extremely unlikely in the setting of small town Montana in the 60s, 70s? And another way to ask the same question, or to enlarge on that question, would be if you had the same kind of basic situation of a boss and a road crew, recently graduated kid, set today in, say, small town Montana, would that principled decision be any more likely or less likely today than it was then?
Wow. I was a young man. I was 21. And my boss's boss had told him to do something. And part of me just felt he had no choice. I didn't realize that he could stand up to the city councilman, you know? And I knew that there was probably down the road some price he was going to have to pay. Yeah. And yet he did it. That's why it's still, to this day, makes me choke up and be so proud of this man who I disagreed with on so many things.
Right.
But
it sounds like it was not a reflection of America at that time.
I think it was a reflection of part of America during that time. I think that there were a lot of people who stood up back then. This was post-McCarthy, but not by much, you know. Roy Cohn was still out there, persecuting people and, being a lawyer for mafia guys and a real estate developer in New York. But it just, I think there are always a large number of people that would stand up. In the first volume of this trilogy, this also choked me up when I tried to read it out loud once. The farmers have about, depending on the weather, 5 to maybe 10 days to get their crops in. A local farmer died before he could harvest his crops. The next day, 50-some farmers from all over the county showed up with their combines, their grain trucks, their fuel trucks. Townspeople showed up to feed them. They put their own year at risk because you could see the clouds coming, you know, and they did it because it was the right thing to do for this deceased farmer. Right. So I think there are a lot of heroics in ordinary, everyday America that we all are not aware of.
Mm-hmm. Now as then.
Pardon?
Now as then.
Now and then. I mean, go out to one of the parks in the metro area and watch somebody come by and pick up a piece of plastic litter and take it to the trash can. You know?
Right.
So I think there's hope. I think there's also fear, but I think there's hope.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all. One more? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for supporting Politics and Prose, okay?